the most powerful family in Renaissance Europe, was driven out of Florence almost overnight. No siege, no burning palace, no final battle. For nearly a century, the Medici had ruled without a crown. They financed popes. They shaped the Renaissance. They turned Florence into the cultural capital of Europe. And yet, when the moment came, their power dissolved with shocking speed. How does a dynasty that controls banks, art, politics, and religion lose everything? This is not just the story of a family's fall. It is the story of how power fractures quietly from within. In the center of Florence, along the narrow and irregular streets that still follow the medieval pattern of guild workshops and parish boundaries, rises the immense rusticated facade of the Palazzo Medici, later known as Palazzo Medici Riccardi. Its heavy stone blocks, laid in deliberate gradations from rough-hewn strength at street level to smoother refinement above, form more than an architectural statement. They articulate a theory of power. Built beginning in 1444 for Cosimo de' Medici, designed by Michelozzo di Bartolomeo, the palace embodied a new kind of authority, private yet public, mercantile yet princely, civic yet dynastic. Its courtyard, proportioned with classical clarity, opened not only onto the sky, but onto an emerging political order in which banking capital, cultural patronage, and subtle governance intertwined. The building did not crown a monarch, it concealed one. Florence in the 15th century did not tolerate kings, but it allowed influence to settle into stone. The Palazzo Medici's placement near the Church of San Lorenzo was neither accidental nor purely devotional. San Lorenzo, redesigned by Filippo Brunelleschi and enriched by Medici patronage, became a sacred extension of family identity. Within its sacristies, especially the old sacristy commissioned by Cosimo, geometry and theology converged under hemispherical domes that echoed Roman antiquity. Space was discipline, proportion was legitimacy. The Medici did not merely occupy Florence. They inscribed themselves into its spiritual and architectural core. Their tombs would rest beneath sculpted marble, while their political methods remained outwardly republican. The republic endured in name, with priors and gonfaloniers elected through established civic procedures. Yet the center of gravity shifted toward the palace on Via Larga. Florence during Cosimo's lifetime was formerly a republic of guilds, shaped by the ordinances of justice and long accustomed to factional turbulence between magnate families. The Albizzi had once dominated the city's councils, and exile had been a familiar instrument of political correction. Cosimo himself experienced exile in 1433, before returning triumphantly a year later. His restoration achieved through alliances and financial leverage rather than force. When he commissioned Michelozzo after rejecting Brunelleschi's more ostentatious design, Cosimo chose moderation as spectacle. The facade would not rival princely courts of Milan or Naples. It would signal stability. The rough lower stones suggested fortification without explicit militarization. The upper levels softened into harmony, announcing cultivated refinement. It was a palace designed for a banker who ruled without a crown. The Medici Bank under Cosimo, and later under his son Piero and grandson Lorenzo, expanded across Europe, with branches in Rome, Venice, Geneva, Bruges, and London. Papal finances passed through Medici accounts. Indulgence revenues, ecclesiastical transfers, and international credit networks converged in Florence. The architecture of the palace mirrored this financial web. Solid foundations, controlled openings, and interior courtyards that regulated light and movement. Visitors entered through a portal that did not overwhelm but guided. Inside, Benozzo Gossoli's fresco cycle of the Journey of the Magi adorned the private chapel. There, sacred narrative blended seamlessly with dynastic portraiture. Members of the Medici family appeared among biblical kings and courtiers, their faces inserted into Salvation history. The frescoes did not proclaim divinity, they normalized proximity to it. Authority in Florence operated spatially. The Palazzo della Signoria, now Palazzo Vecchio, remained the official seat of Republican government. Its crenellated tower symbolized communal sovereignty, and its great hall accommodated councils and magistrates. Yet the rhythm of decision-making often began elsewhere. Clients and petitioners moved through the Medici courtyard, Artists, scholars, and humanists gathered under Medici protection. Marsilio Ficino translated Plato under Cosimo's patronage. The Platonic Academy, though informal, flourished in villas such as Careggi, where philosophical discourse aligned with political consolidation. These suburban retreats were extensions of urban authority, sites where cultivated intellect reinforced social hierarchy. Architecture thus became argument. The Medici invested in convents, libraries, and public works, including the reconstruction of San Marco under Michelozzo. The Library of San Marco, with its ordered rows of desks and controlled illumination, made knowledge visible as a civic resource. Manuscripts collected and copied under Medici sponsorship affirmed Florence as a center of Renaissance humanism. Yet this generosity contained calculation. By financing religious and cultural institutions, the Medici embedded obligation within gratitude. Patronage was a contract without parchment. The stones of Florence recorded these transactions in chapels, cloisters, and facades. Under Lorenzo de Medici, known later as Lorenzo il Magnifico, the aesthetic of authority deepened. Lorenzo inherited not only wealth, but a precarious balance of Italian power politics. Florence navigated between Milan, Naples, Venice, and the Papal States, each wary of dominance by the others. The Pazzi Conspiracy of 1478 revealed the fragility beneath the cultivated surface. During High Mass in the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, assassins attacked Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano. Giuliano was killed, Lorenzo survived. The cathedral itself, crowned by Brunelleschi's dome, became a stage where civic sanctity collided with factional violence. In the aftermath, retribution was swift. Conspirators were executed, some hanged from the windows of the Palazzo della Signoria. The Republic's public architecture displayed punishment, reinforcing order through spectacle. Lorenzo's Florence responded not by retreating into austerity, but by amplifying cultural radiance. The courtly atmosphere of his circle nurtured poets such as Angelo Poliziano and artists including the young Michelangelo, who resided for a time within the Medici household. Yet beneath this efflorescence, financial strains accumulated. The Medici Bank, once disciplined and diversified, began to suffer from mismanagement in distant branches. Loans to monarchs proved difficult to recover. The London branch faltered, the Bruges branch collapsed. The architecture of power required maintenance not only in stone, but in credit. As revenues contracted, the facade of stability masked growing vulnerability. Florence itself remained sensitive to moral critique. The sermons of Girolamo Savonarola, a Dominican friar preaching at San Marco in the 1490s, would soon challenge the ethical foundations of Medici rule. His voice echoed through the same spaces once adorned by Medici patronage. The piazzas that had hosted triumphal entries and civic festivals would become arenas of penitential fervor. Yet at the height of Lorenzo's influence, the city's spatial order still reflected Medici calibration. Processions moved between palace and cathedral. Marriages linked dynastic ambition to European courts. Villas in the Tuscan countryside staged controlled leisure. Authority radiated outward from carefully constructed interiors. The fall of the House of Medici would not begin with a single blow. It would unfold as a gradual misalignment between architectural permanence and political contingency. Stone could endure centuries, but credit could evaporate within months. Frescoes could depict sacred continuity, yet alliances could fracture under external pressure. In 1492, when Lorenzo died, Florence lost not only a patron, but a mediator among volatile Italian states. His son Piero de' Medici inherited a city whose grandeur masked financial weakness and geopolitical exposure. The very palaces that had embodied prudence now stood as heavy witnesses to decisions made in rooms where maps and ledgers once lay open beneath coffered ceilings. The Palazzo Medici remained physically intact, its courtyard serene, its chapel luminous. But architecture cannot negotiate with invading armies or absolve diplomatic miscalculations. As the French King Charles VIII ascended into Italy in 1494, demanding passage and support, Florence confronted a crisis that would test the foundations laid by Cosimo half a century earlier. The spatial choreography of authority, palace, church, council hall, would soon rearrange itself under pressure. The stones would not crumble, yet the balance they symbolized would begin to shift. The story of the Medici collapse begins, therefore, not in battlefields or bank ledgers alone, but in the disciplined geometry of Renaissance space. The Palazzo Medici, San Lorenzo, San Marco, and the civic heart around the Palazzo della Signoria formed an ecosystem of influence. Within this built environment, power was negotiated, displayed, softened, and enforced. The decline that followed would reveal how deeply the family's authority depended on the harmony between architectural symbolism and political acumen. When that harmony faltered, the stones remained, but the dynasty's grip loosened, and Florence would enter a period of spiritual upheaval and Republican reassertion that transformed its identity. The facades still stand today, their rustication catching afternoon light along Via Cavour. Visitors cross the same courtyard where ambassadors once waited. The chapel's frescoes still depict an eternal procession. Yet these surfaces preserve not only triumph, but warning. They remind us that the architecture of authority, however measured and refined, is ultimately vulnerable to the shifting currents of finance, faith, and foreign ambition. In the shadow of these stones, the dark story of decline begins to take shape. When Charles VIII of France crossed the Alps in 1494, claiming the Kingdom of Naples and carrying with him the weight of French artillery, the delicate equilibrium of the Italian peninsula collapsed with startling speed. Florence, positioned between ambition and vulnerability, found itself exposed. Piero de Medici, Lorenzo's eldest son, lacked both his father's diplomatic restraint and his grandfather's strategic patience. The city's architecture still conveyed authority, the Palazzo Medici's stones unaltered, the dome of Santa Maria del Fiore dominating the skyline. But authority itself had thinned into appearance. Within weeks of Charles's approach, Piero negotiated directly with the French king, conceding fortresses and financial terms that many Florentines interpreted as humiliation. The Republic had endured foreign pressures before, yet never had its informal ruler yielded so visibly without consultation. Public anger moved swiftly through Florence's civic spaces. The Palazzo della Signoria, long a symbolic counterweight to Medici influence, became the stage for repudiation. In November 1494, the Medici were expelled. Piero fled the city, his departure marking the first definitive fracture in the family's dominion since Cosimo's exile 6 decades earlier. The palace on Via Larga was seized, Medici property was catalogued, and the carefully curated image of continuity dissolved into inventory lists and political decrees. Stone endured, but possession shifted. The Republic, in theory restored, reclaimed its institutions with renewed intensity. Into this vacuum stepped Girolamo Savonarola, the Dominican friar whose sermons had already unsettled Florence's conscience. Preaching in the cathedral and at San Marco, Savonarola framed recent events not merely as political miscalculation, but as divine judgment. He invoked scripture to interpret Charles VIII as an instrument of providence. Florence, he declared, had been spared annihilation to become a new Jerusalem, purified and renewed. His authority did not rest in bank ledgers or patronage networks, but in moral urgency. Crowds gathered in the Piazza della Signoria, listening as he condemned corruption, luxury, and what he perceived as pagan excess within Renaissance culture. Savonarola's ascendancy revealed how fragile Medici cultural supremacy had been. The same city that once celebrated pageantry and classical revival now organized the Bonfire of the Vanities in 1497, where objects deemed morally corrupting, cosmetics, gaming tables, certain artworks, and books were burned publicly. While later accounts sometimes exaggerate the scope of these fires, contemporary records confirm their symbolic force. The piazza, once a theater of civic pride and Medici spectacle, became an arena of penitence. Authority shifted from palace interiors to pulpit rhetoric. The geometry of power was redrawn not in stone, but in sermon. Florence during this interlude experimented with broader Republican governance. A great council was established, modeled partly on Venetian institutions, expanding political participation among eligible citizens. The Palazzo della Signoria housed debates that sought to stabilize the state without Medici mediation. Yet structural challenges persisted. Economic networks disrupted by the Medici expulsion required reconstruction. External threats remained constant as French and Spanish ambitions continued to collide across Italy. Savonarola's prophetic claims, once galvanizing, began to strain under diplomatic realities. Papal politics soon entangled Florence's spiritual experiment. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, regarded Savonarola's denunciations with suspicion and hostility. The friar's refusal to moderate his critiques led to excommunication in 1497. Tensions escalated within Florence itself, dividing supporters known as the Piagnoni from opponents wary of theocratic overreach. In 1498, Savonarola was arrested, tried, and ultimately executed in the Piazza della Signoria. His body was burned and the ashes cast into the Arno River. The square that had witnessed Medici humiliation and penitential fires now bore the marks of another violent reversal. The cycle of expulsion and execution did not restore stability. Instead, it exposed the structural dependencies that had underpinned Medici dominance. Without their financial coordination, Florence struggled to maintain diplomatic leverage. Republican governance required consensus in a city accustomed to guided equilibrium. It was within this unsettled context that Niccolò Machiavelli emerged as a civil servant and diplomat, serving the Florentine Republic from 1498 to 1512. His observations of shifting alliances, mercenary warfare, and fragile institutions would later inform the Prince and Discourses on Livy, texts shaped directly by the instability following Medici exile. Meanwhile, the broader Italian wars transformed the peninsula into a contested field for France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Florence's independence depended on navigating these larger forces. The city fortified itself, and its leaders attempted to preserve republican autonomy. Yet without a dominant banking house to mediate financial flows and political favors, Florence lacked the cohesive center that Cosimo and Lorenzo had once provided. The architecture of authority stood intact, but its coordinating intelligence was dispersed. In 1512, Spanish forces allied with Pope Julius II moved against Florence. The Republican militia proved insufficient against seasoned troops. The city capitulated, and the Medici returned. Giuliano de' Medici and his brother Giovanni re-entered a Florence altered by nearly 2 decades of upheaval. The restoration did not recreate the subtle hegemony of Cosimo's era. Instead, it marked the beginning of a more overt consolidation. Giovanni soon became Pope Leo X in 1513, intertwining Florentine politics with papal ambition at an unprecedented level. The family that once governed discreetly within republican forms now held direct spiritual authority over Christendom. The Palazzo Medici resumed its function as dynastic center, yet Florence had changed. Republican institutions survived in diminished form, their autonomy curtailed. Opposition simmered beneath enforced compliance. The Medici increasingly relied on external military support to secure their position, signaling a shift from persuasive patronage to coercive reinforcement. Architecture again played its role. Projects such as the Medici Chapel in San Lorenzo, later designed in part by Michelangelo, monumentalized the family's claim to permanence. Marble tombs elevated individual rulers into sculpted eternity. Yet these monuments also testified to anxiety. They asserted continuity in an age of fragmentation. The financial base that once underwrote Medici influence never fully recovered its 15th century breadth. European credit systems evolved and competition intensified. Moreover, the Protestant Reformation, initiated in 1517 by Martin Luther's challenge to papal indulgences, destabilized the ecclesiastical structures intertwined with Medici fortunes. Pope Leo X's expenditures on art and architecture, including contributions to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, strained resources. The nexus of Florentine banking and papal finance that had empowered Cosimo now faced ideological and fiscal disruption. By the 1520s, Florence again found itself vulnerable to external conflict. In 1527, following the sack of Rome by imperial troops of Charles V, anti-Medici sentiment surged once more. The Medici were expelled for a second time, and a republic was re-established. The city fortified itself against anticipated retaliation. Michelangelo, long associated with Medici patronage, supervised defensive works along the walls. The symbolism was stark. An artist nurtured by Medici favor, now defending a republic resisting their return. Architecture, once emblem of dynastic stability, became instrument of resistance. The Siege of Florence from 1529 to 1530, conducted by imperial and papal forces, marked a decisive turning point. After months of deprivation and bombardment, the city surrendered. The The Medici were restored yet again, this time under imperial authority. Alessandro de' Medici was installed as Duke of Florence in 1532, formalizing a hereditary principate and effectively ending the Republican experiment. The transformation was irreversible. Florence ceased to be a republic in substance, becoming instead a ducal state under Medici rule. This final restoration altered the meaning of Medici power. No longer masked by republican ritual, authority now manifested openly as dynastic sovereignty. The later construction of the Uffizi under Cosimo I de' Medici reorganized administrative functions into a centralized complex, physically embodying bureaucratic consolidation. The Palazzo Vecchio was reshaped to accommodate ducal residence before the court relocated to the Pitti Palace across the Arno, expanding territorial symbolism. Power crossed the river, occupying new architectural domains and redefining urban hierarchy. Yet beneath these grand gestures lay the memory of exile, sermon, and siege. The fall of the House of Medici had not been a singular event, but a series of ruptures revealing the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated networks of influence. Florence's spatial authority, its palaces, chapels, and squares, had hosted cycles of dominance and displacement. Each restoration carried scars from prior collapse. The harmony once cultivated between architecture and prudence had been replaced by reliance on imperial backing and dynastic assertion. In these decades of fracture, the foundations of Florentine autonomy eroded. The republic that had nurtured Renaissance humanism gave way to centralized rule. The Medici survived, but the city's political identity transformed irrevocably. What began as a family's discrete ascendancy within communal forms concluded in ducal authority secured by foreign arms. The stones remained eloquent, but their meaning had changed. Where once they signaled balance, they now proclaimed consolidation. The dark story of the Medici fall, therefore, unfolds not as abrupt annihilation, but as gradual metamorphosis, from merchant princes to embattled exiles, from restored patrons to hereditary dukes. Florence endured, yet the civic equilibrium that had defined its golden age did not return. In the shadow of siege walls and sculpted tombs, the city entered a new epoch, shaped as much by remembered vulnerability as by inherited ambition. When Alessandro de' Medici assumed the newly created title of Duke of Florence in 1532, the city crossed an invisible threshold. The institutions of republican governance, long weakened by faction and foreign intervention, did not vanish overnight. Councils continued to meet, magistracies retained ceremonial functions, and civic rituals endured. Yet sovereignty had shifted decisively. The authority that Cosimo de' Medici once exercised through influence and patronage was now formalized in hereditary rule, sanctioned by Emperor Charles V. Florence, once the emblem of communal independence in central Italy, entered a princely age. Alessandro's rule was brief and contentious. Contemporary accounts portray him as reliant on imperial backing and surrounded by suspicion among both elite families and broader citizenry. His court occupied the Palazzo Vecchio, reshaping the former seat of republican deliberation into ducal residence. This physical occupation carried symbolic weight. The great hall that once echoed with collective debate now reinforced singular authority. Spatial continuity masked constitutional rupture. In January 1537, Alessandro was assassinated by his cousin Lorenzo de Medici. The murder occurred within the ducal residence, a private act that reverberated across Florence. Lorenzo justified his deed as tyrannicide, claiming to restore liberty. Yet no republican revival followed. Instead, political uncertainty invited swift consolidation. Imperial support and elite maneuvering elevated Cosimo de' Medici, a distant branch descendant, to leadership. At 17 years old, Cosimo I inherited not the balanced city of Lorenzo il Magnifico, but a fractured state accustomed to upheaval. Cosimo I's governance marked a profound recalibration. Where earlier Medici navigated faction through subtle influence, Cosimo built institutions designed for durability. He restructured councils, curtailed aristocratic autonomy, and strengthened military organization. Fortifications expanded, including the construction of the Fortezza da Basso, begun in 1534 under Alessandro and completed under Cosimo's authority. These walls were not decorative affirmations of prestige, but instruments of control, capable of containing both foreign invasion and internal revolt. Architecture again served as manifesto. In 1540, Cosimo moved his residence from the Palazzo Vecchio to the Palazzo Pitti across the Arno River, a palace originally begun by the banker Luca Pitti in the 15th century. The relocation symbolized both expansion and separation. The Arno became not merely a geographic boundary, but a line demarcating ducal magnificence from the older Republican core. The bubbly gardens behind the Pitti Palace were developed into a controlled landscape of terraces, sculptures, and axial vistas. Nature itself was disciplined into geometry, mirroring administrative centralization. The construction of the Uffizi, initiated in 1560 and designed by Giorgio Vasari, further articulated Cosimo's ambitions. Conceived as offices for magistrates, the elongated courtyard framed by uniform facades linked the Palazzo Vecchio to the river. Administrative rationality acquired architectural expression. The corridor, later built by Vasari in 1565, connected the Palazzo Vecchio to the Pitti Palace, allowing the ducal family to traverse the city above street level, insulated from public exposure. This elevated passageway materialized political distance. The Medici no longer required visible negotiation in piazzas. They moved within controlled corridors of power. Cosimo's transformation of Florence extended beyond urban redesign. In 1569, Pope Pius V granted him the title of Grand Duke of Tuscany, elevating the Medici from city rulers to regional sovereigns. The duchy encompassed not only Florence but also Siena, annexed after Spanish-backed conflict in 1555. Territorial expansion altered the scale of governance. The Medici court adopted ceremonies and diplomatic protocols befitting princely Europe. Marriage alliances connected the dynasty to Habsburg and French courts. The memory of exile receded beneath orchestrated stability, yet consolidation carried costs. The Republican culture that had fostered civic participation and mercantile dynamism gradually narrowed. Noble families integrated into court hierarchies, their independence constrained by ducal favor. Economic vitality shifted as Atlantic trade routes expanded beyond the Mediterranean. Florence's textile industry, once dominant, faced competition. The financial ingenuity that had propelled the early Medici did not translate seamlessly into early modern statecraft. After Cosimo I's death in 1574, his successors inherited a state outwardly secure, yet internally rigid. Francesco I and later Ferdinando I continued patronage of science and art. The Accademia del Disegno and scientific enterprises under figures like Galileo Galilei flourished within courtly frameworks. Cultural brilliance persisted, but its locus had changed. No longer anchored in a vibrant republic, innovation now depended on ducal approval. The 17th century revealed structural fragility. Population decline, economic contraction, and administrative stagnation diminished Tuscany's relative influence. Grand dukes such as Cosimo II and Ferdinando II navigated the turbulence of European wars, including the 30 Years' War, with cautious neutrality. Yet neutrality could not compensate for reduced economic dynamism. Court expenditures continued, but fiscal resilience waned. By the 18th century, the Medici line approached extinction. Gian-Gastone de' Medici, who ruled from 1723 to 1737, governed a state markedly diminished from its Renaissance prominence. Contemporary observers described his court as isolated and increasingly ceremonial. Without legitimate heirs, succession negotiations involved European powers. Upon Gian-Gastone's death in 1737, the Medici dynasty ended in the male line. Control of Tuscany transferred to the House of Habsburg-Lorraine, inaugurating a new chapter detached from Florentine Republican origins. The physical legacy of the Medici remained overwhelming. Palaces, chapels, and administrative complexes defined the city's silhouette. Yet the meaning of these structures had shifted across centuries, from instruments of discrete oligarchic influence to emblems of centralized princely rule, and finally to monuments of a concluded dynasty. The Palazzo Medici Riccardi, sold to the Riccardi family in 1659, symbolized this transition. What began as the epicenter of mercantile power became a relic within a transformed political landscape. The fall of the House of Medici, therefore, cannot be confined to the moment of 1494 or even the siege of 1530. It unfolded across generations as the creative tension between republican form and familial dominance resolved into autocracy, and autocracy gradually lost adaptive vitality. Florence's collapse as a leading political force accompanied this evolution. The city that once shaped European finance and Renaissance humanism became a regional capital under foreign-aligned Grand Dukes. Walking today through the courtyard of the Uffizi or ascending the bubbly terraces, one encounters layers of authority sedimented in stone. Each facade bears witness to transformation. The Medici rise relied on financial acuity and spatial symbolism aligned with communal structures. Their survival demanded princely consolidation. Their ultimate decline emerged not from dramatic overthrow, but from gradual obsolescence within shifting European systems of trade, warfare, and diplomacy. In this trajectory lies the darker narrative. Power built upon civic integration thrived in one era. Power insulated within corridors and fortresses endured but narrowed. The architecture that once harmonized with Florence's republican pulse ultimately stood apart from it. When the dynasty ended, the stones remained magnificent, yet the city they had once animated had long ceased to command the influence it held in the 15th century. The House of Medici did not vanish in flames or revolution. It receded into succession treaties and inherited titles, leaving behind a transformed Tuscany. Florence's identity shifted from restless republic to curated heritage. The palaces endure as masterpieces of Renaissance design, but they also testify to the gradual erosion of a political culture that once balanced wealth, art, and civic participation in precarious equilibrium. In that erosion resides the true collapse of Florentine power. By the time Gian de Medici died in 1737, the political drama that had once convulsed Florence had quieted into ceremony. There was no violent expulsion, no bonfire in the piazza, no siege engines pressing against the city walls. Instead, the transition unfolded through diplomatic negotiation among European courts. The Grand Duchy of Tuscany passed to Francis Stephen of Lorraine, later Holy Roman Emperor Francis I, husband of Empress Maria Theresa. The Medici name, once synonymous with Florentine ambition, receded into history not through spectacle, but through extinction. Yet the end of the dynasty did not dissolve its imprint. The city remained saturated with Medici architecture, iconography, and institutional design. In 1737, Anna Maria Luisa de Medici, the last direct heir of the family, negotiated the so-called Family Pact, ensuring that the Medici art collections would remain in Florence rather than being removed by the incoming Habsburg-Lorraine rulers. This agreement preserved the integrity of collections housed in palaces and galleries, including what would become the Uffizi Gallery. Her act did not restore Medici power, but it stabilized their cultural legacy within the urban fabric. The paradox of the Medici collapse lies in this endurance. Politically, Florence had diminished. Economically, it no longer commanded the financial networks that once connected Bruges to Rome. Yet culturally, the city's prestige intensified over time. Travelers of the 18th and 19th centuries arrived on the Grand Tour, drawn by the accumulated layers of Renaissance art and architecture. The Palazzo Medici, the Pitti Palace, San Lorenzo, and the Uffizi were no longer instruments of governance. They became destinations of memory. The authority once exercised within their walls transformed into aesthetic reverence. This transformation did not erase the structural consequences of the Medici era. The shift from republic to hereditary duchy had altered Tuscany's political culture. Civic participation narrowed and bureaucratic centralization replaced communal dynamism. Under Habsburg-Lorraine administration, reforms would eventually modernize aspects of governance, including legal and economic systems. Yet these reforms occurred within a framework fundamentally shaped by Medici consolidation. The republic that had fostered the explosive creativity of the 15th century did not return. Florence's long arc from mercantile commune to princely capital illustrates how power adapts and how adaptation carries cost. Cosimo de' Medici's genius lay in harmonizing private wealth with public form. His palace did not dominate the skyline, it conversed with it. Lorenzo il Magnifico extended that balance through diplomacy and patronage, aligning artistic brilliance with political moderation. But as external pressures intensified and internal cohesion weakened, the family increasingly relied on explicit sovereignty. Dukes replaced de facto leaders. Fortresses supplanted persuasion. Elevated corridors replaced negotiated presence. The Medici chapels in San Lorenzo encapsulate this trajectory. Designed in part by Michelangelo and later completed by others, the new sacristy houses the tombs of Lorenzo, Duke of Urbino, and Giuliano, Duke of Nemours. Allegorical figures of dawn, dusk, night, and day recline across marble sarcophagi. Time itself becomes sculptural theme. The figures are not triumphant. They are contemplative, even burdened. Within these forms resides an awareness of transience. The Medici sought permanence in stone, yet their lineage would fade within centuries. The chapel stands as meditation on mortality, disguised as dynastic monument. Similarly, the Uffizzi's long corridor, originally administrative, evolved into gallery. Paintings once embedded within private devotion or courtly display entered curated sequence. Authority became narrative. Visitors walked through rooms arranged chronologically, absorbing the development of Renaissance art as historical progression. The building that embodied bureaucratic efficiency now stages collective memory. In this shift from governance to exhibition lies a subtle echo of Florence's transformation, from active center of European finance and politics to guardian of artistic heritage. The fall of Florentine power cannot be reduced solely to Medici decisions. Broader forces reshaped Europe. Atlantic trade redirected wealth towards Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and England. Religious conflicts fractured Christendom. The consolidation of nation-states reconfigured diplomatic hierarchies. Within this continental recalibration, a city-state, even one as sophisticated as Florence, faced structural limits. The Medici navigated these currents with varying success, but no dynasty could fully counteract such systemic change. What distinguishes the Medici story is the intimate relationship between space and sovereignty. Florence's decline was visible not in ruined walls but in altered functions. The Palazzo della Signoria remained standing. It no longer housed a self-governing republic. The Pitti Palace expanded magnificently. It signified princely withdrawal from civic immediacy. The Arno continued to flow beneath the Ponte Vecchio. Its commercial vibrancy diminished relative to global maritime ports. Continuity of form concealed discontinuity of power. In the 19th century, during the Risorgimento, Florence briefly became capital of a unified Italy from 1865 to 1871. The city once again assumed political prominence, though within a national rather than republican framework. Yet even this resurgence relied symbolically on Renaissance heritage. The memory of civic independence, cultivated through Medici patronage and preserved in stone, contributed to modern Italian identity. The dynasty's legacy thus extended beyond its lifespan, informing narratives of cultural and national formation. Today, scholars examine account books, diplomatic correspondence, architectural plans, and personal letters to reconstruct the texture of Medici governance. Archival research in the Archivio di Stato di Firenze reveals the administrative complexity behind the facades. Financial registers chart the rise and contraction of banking networks. Council minutes record debates over taxation, defense, and foreign alliance. These documents confirm that decline emerged through accumulation, miscalculations, demographic shifts, evolving trade routes, rather than singular catastrophe. The dark story, therefore, is measured in gradual recalibration. A family that mastered the art of indirect rule found itself compelled toward overt sovereignty. In securing that sovereignty, it reshaped the political culture that had enabled its ascent. Florence survived, yet its character transformed. The republic that once balanced guild interests, humanist discourse, and financial innovation yielded to centralized administration and dynastic continuity. Over time, even that continuity dissolved. Standing in the courtyard of the Palazzo Medici Riccardi, one can observe the gradation of stone from rugged base to polished cornice. The design intended to communicate strength moderated by refinement. It still does, but the message now belongs to history. The palace is a museum, its chapel preserved behind controlled lighting, its frescoes interpreted by curators rather than courtiers. Authority has migrated from governance to preservation. The collapse of Florentine power did not erase the city's influence on Western culture. Instead, it redirected that influence from political command to artistic exemplar. The Medici rise fostered conditions for Renaissance brilliance. Their fall revealed the fragility of political structures underpinning cultural flowering. In tracing this arc, from merchant oligarchy to grand ducal state to historical memory, we confront the tension between permanence and change embedded in Renaissance stone. The House of Medici shaped Florence through architecture, finance, and patronage. Their decline reshaped it through consolidation, dependence, and eventual obsolescence. The city's streets still follow medieval lines. Its domes and palaces still dominate the horizon. Yet beneath this continuity lies a history of transformation as profound as any battlefield defeat. The dark story resides not in spectacle, but in the quiet redefinition of power. How it is built, how it adapts, and how in time it yields to forces beyond its design. In the centuries following the extinction of the Medici line, Florence entered a quieter historical register. No longer a crucible of European diplomacy, no longer a laboratory of Republican experiment, the city settled into a role defined by memory. Yet memory itself can exert power. The spatial order created by the Medici continued to shape daily life, structuring movement, commerce, and perception. Streets widened under ducal planning, still directed traffic. Administrative buildings remained in use. Churches endowed by Medici patronage preserved liturgical continuity. The city did not dismantle its past, it inhabited it. The 19th century introduced industrialization and national consolidation, processes that bypassed Florence's earlier mercantile primacy. When the Kingdom of Italy briefly designated Florence as capital between 1865 and 1871, urban renovations altered portions of the medieval core. New boulevards cut through dense quarters in projects inspired by Parisian modernization. Even in this transformation, Renaissance monuments were preserved as anchors of identity. The Palazzo Vecchio, the Uffizi, and the Pitti Palace functioned less as administrative necessities and more as symbols within a unified national narrative. The Medici legacy was reframed from dynastic authority to cultural patrimony. Scholarly reassessment in the 20th century deepened understanding of the dynasty's complexity. Earlier romantic portrayals emphasizing patronage and artistic brilliance gave way to nuanced analysis of fiscal policy, social stratification, and political coercion. Archival research illuminated the mechanisms by which Cosimo de' Medici balanced oligarchic interests, how Lorenzo managed diplomatic alliances, and how Cosimo I consolidated princely power through bureaucratic reform. This scholarship revealed the interplay between charisma and calculation, between civic engagement and strategic exclusion. The transformation of Medici spaces into museums crystallized the shift from power to preservation. The Uffizi evolved into one of the world's foremost galleries, its collection arranged to narrate the development of Italian painting. The Pitti Palace houses multiple museums, from the Palatine Gallery to the Treasury of the Grand Dukes. San Lorenzo and the Medici chapels remain active sites of worship and visitation, merging sacred continuity with historical reflection. Each space invites contemplation, not of living authority, but of accumulated influence. Yet the endurance of these monuments can obscure the fragility that once defined them. The Medici Bank, so central to 15th century dominance, collapsed within decades of Lorenzo's death. Branch failures in London and Bruges weakened the financial lattice supporting Florentine influence. International credit proved volatile, subject to royal defaults and market fluctuations. The architecture of authority masked fiscal vulnerability. This disjunction between visible stability and economic strain recurs across history, and Florence offers a precise case study. The gradual eclipse of Florentine political power also underscores the limits of cultural capital when detached from structural adaptation. Renaissance humanism reshaped European thought, but intellectual prestige did not guarantee geopolitical resilience. As Atlantic economies surged, Mediterranean city-states faced contraction. Tuscany's agrarian base could not compete with colonial influxes of silver and expanding maritime trade. The Medici, even in their ducal phase, presided over a region adjusting to diminished relevance within a transforming Europe. In examining the fall of the House of Medici, one confronts the distinction between decline and disappearance. Florence did not collapse into ruin. Its institutions adapted. Its streets thrived with artisans and merchants. Its churches continued to mark liturgical seasons. What collapsed was a particular configuration of power, a synthesis of banking innovation, republican form, and cultural patronage that had briefly placed a Tuscan city at the heart of European affairs. The dynasty's extinction formalized this shift, but the process had begun generations earlier. The endurance of Medici architecture provides a final meditation on time. Rusticated stones weather yet hold firm. Frescoes fade but remain legible. Marble figures accumulate the patina of centuries. These materials resist immediate decay, projecting permanence beyond political lifespan. Visitors often encounter Florence as an aesthetic continuum, unaware of the conflicts and recalibrations embedded within its fabric. The dark story resides beneath the surface harmony. To stand beneath Brunelleschi's dome at Santa Maria del Fiore is to experience the ambition of a republic that believed in collective achievement. To walk through the Boboli Gardens is to sense the choreography of princely command. These experiences coexist within the same city, layered rather than erased. The Medici fall did not demolish one Florence and replace it with another. It reoriented the existing city toward new meanings. In the present, Florence balances heritage tourism with contemporary life. Markets operate near Renaissance palaces. Students study in rooms once occupied by ducal administrators. Restoration projects maintain facades conceived half a millennium ago. The city's economy now relies significantly on the very legacy produced by Medici patronage. Art, architecture, and memory sustain livelihoods in ways the 15th century bankers could scarcely have anticipated. The collapse of Florentine power, then, offers reflection rather than spectacle. It demonstrates how authority rooted in adaptable networks can ascend rapidly, and how rigidity or external transformation can narrow its scope. The Medici harnessed architecture to legitimize influence, but architecture alone could not secure perpetual dominance. Finance, diplomacy, faith, and social cohesion required continual recalibration. When recalibration lagged behind changing conditions, decline followed, not as sudden ruin, but as gradual repositioning within a broader system. The House of Medici shaped Florence's skyline and its political vocabulary. Their rise revealed the potency of aligning wealth with public form. Their fall revealed the vulnerability inherent in concentrating that alignment within a single lineage. In tracing this arc across centuries, from Cosimo's cautious palace to young Gaston's airless court, we witness the transformation of a city from active architect of European power to custodian of its own memory. The stones remain. They hold stories of ambition, exile, restoration, consolidation, and extinction. They remind us that power, however elegantly constructed, exists within temporal bounds. Florence endures not because the Medici survived, but because the city absorbed their legacy, adapted to their absence, and allowed their monuments to become chapters rather than conclusions. In that endurance lies the final dimension of this dark story, the quiet persistence of place beyond the lifespan of dynasty. The history of the House of Medici resists the simplicity of rise and fall. It unfolds instead as a sustained negotiation between private ambition and public structure, between inherited wealth and communal identity, between architectural permanence and political contingency. Florence in the early 15th century offered fertile ground for such negotiation, a republic governed by guild elites, animated by mercantile enterprise, and alert to both internal faction and external rivalry. Within this environment, the Medici did not initially overthrow institutions. They inhabited them, subtly redirecting their currents. Cosimo de' Medici understood that visibility could provoke resistance. His palace on Via Larga did not tower over the cathedral. It aligned with the street. Its rusticated facade suggested strength without explicit domination. In commissioning Michelozzo rather than Brunelleschi's grander proposal, Cosimo calibrated perception. The building communicated authority that seemed civic rather than monarchical. In that calibration lay the genius of early Medici strategy, power exercised within the grammar of republican form. Yet the very success of this approach created structural tension. Influence accumulated around a single family inevitably narrowed the field of shared governance. As banking networks expanded across Europe, as papal finances intertwined with Florentine accounts, the Medici occupied a position difficult to challenge, yet equally difficult to sustain indefinitely. International credit depended on trust and stability. When branches failed, when royal debts went unpaid, the financial scaffolding weakened. Architecture endured, liquidity did not. The expulsion of 1494 exposed this imbalance. Florence reclaimed its Republican vocabulary, but the absence of Medici coordination revealed dependency. Savonarola's prophetic interlude reframed civic identity around moral renewal, yet spiritual fervor could not substitute for durable diplomatic equilibrium. The republic that followed navigated European wars without the concentrated leverage of earlier decades. When the Medici returned, they did so in a transformed political landscape. Under Cosimo I, the shift from informal dominance to explicit sovereignty resolved earlier ambiguity. Ducal authority centralized administration, fortified defenses, and restructured territory. The Uffizis ordered facades, the Boboli gardens disciplined vistas, and the Vasari corridors' elevated passage manifested a new conception of rule. Hierarchical, insulated, enduring. Florence ceased to be a republic in substance. It became the capital of a territorial state. This transformation stabilized governance but altered civic character. The participatory dynamism of guild politics diminished. Noble families integrated into court hierarchies, and opposition found fewer institutional outlets. Tuscany functioned with relative peace compared to the turbulence of earlier decades, yet its influence contracted within a Europe increasingly defined by larger nation-states and global trade routes. The Atlantic economy redirected wealth north and west. Florence's Mediterranean centrality waned. The extinction of the Medici line in 1737 formalized a process long underway. Power transferred through diplomatic agreement rather than insurrection. The Habsburg-Lorraine administration inherited not a vibrant republic, but a consolidated duchy shaped by centuries of Medici governance. Florence's political primacy had faded, yet its architectural and artistic capital remained intact. Anna Maria Luisa's insistence that the collections remain in the city ensured continuity of cultural identity, even as dynastic sovereignty dissolved. In retrospect, the dark story of the Medici fall is not one of abrupt catastrophe, but of gradual redefinition. The family that mastered indirect control became architects of overt rule. In securing that rule, they reshaped the civic ecosystem that had enabled their ascent. Over generations, external economic and geopolitical forces further narrowed Florence's sphere of influence. The dynasty concluded not amid flames, but within succession treaties, its monuments already transitioning from instruments of power to repositories of heritage. To walk today through Florence is to encounter this layered history in stone. The Palazzo Medici Riccardi recalls the cautious audacity of a banker who governed without title. The Palazzo Vecchio bears the imprint of both Republican councils and ducal chambers. The Pitti Palace and Boboli Gardens testify to princely consolidation. The Uffizi transforms administrative rationality into curated memory. Each site embodies a phase in the city's political evolution. Florence's endurance complicates the narrative of collapse. The city did not vanish. It recalibrated. Its influence migrated from finance and diplomacy to art and historical imagination. Renaissance humanism, fostered under Medici patronage, shaped European intellectual life long after Florentine armies ceased to march. Cultural capital outlived political command. In that survival lies a form of victory distinct from sovereignty, yet the caution remains. Power grounded in adaptability thrives. Power that grows insulated risks stagnation. The Medici trajectory illustrates both principles. Their early alignment with civic structures allowed ascent without overt confrontation. Their later consolidation secured stability but narrowed flexibility. External transformations, economic shifts, religious upheaval, imperial competition exposed these limits. Florence's reduced geopolitical role was not the result of singular failure, but of cumulative constraint. The stones of Florence hold this lesson quietly. They do not proclaim decline, they invite reflection. Their endurance contrasts with the brevity of individual lives and dynastic lines. Cosimo's calculated facade, Lorenzo's cultivated court, Savonarola's fervent sermons, Cosimo I's fortified duchy, Gian Gaston's airless palace, all belong to the same urban continuum. Authority passed from hand to hand, from council chamber to ducal corridor, from ledger to museum archive. In tracing the fall of the House of Medici, we observe how architecture can both express and outlast political intention. Buildings designed to assert legitimacy become monuments of memory. Corridors built for insulated movement become pathways for visitors. Tombs intended to eternalize lineage become studies in mortality. Florence endures as a city of continuity layered over transformation. The collapse of Florentine power, then, resides not in ruined walls, but in altered function and diminished reach. A republic that once shaped continental finance became a regional state, then a cultural capital within a unified nation. The Medici rise and fall frame this arc, illuminating the interplay between ambition and adaptation. Their story remains embedded in Florence's streets, inviting each generation to reconsider how power is constructed, sustained, and ultimately surrendered to time.